Hey everybody, welcome back. A little bit of a different port guide today because instead of actually walking you around through a port, showing you what there is to see and do, we are going to be talking about Glacier Bay National Park, and I am going to do it using the Glacier Bay National Park map. I will walk you through this map as we talk about what there is to see, the can't miss sights as your ship is sailing through Glacier Bay. Glacier Bay days on board are usually very, very busy for me, so I've never found the time to be able to make one of these port guide videos that I love making for you. Make sure you check out my other port guide videos, especially on the Alaska ports. Also check out my book, See More Alaska, for what to see and do on your Alaska cruise, including information about visiting Glacier Bay, but I wanted to break it down for you in a video. What do you need to know to get the most out of your visit to Glacier Bay? I'm Valerie. I'm a cruise director working at sea for about 10 years. Right now I spend 8 months out of the year at sea, so I am here to help you get the most out of your time in port. So first of all, you will receive one of these Glacier Bay National Park Service maps in your stateroom. Okay, it will probably come the night before, maybe it's delivered the morning of your visit. It kind of depends on the cruise line, but the National Park Service loads these on the ship throughout the season so the guests can get them. So if you've been to a national park before, you're familiar with these big maps you can get in the visitor center. Maps on both sides of it, information about the park. This map is really, really helpful. The main thing you're going to want to focus on is kind of the zoomed in version of the map that you're going to get. So you'll focus mainly on this. You'll be able to see where your route is on this map. So this map doesn't have your route marked, but this is where you're going. There's also a bigger map on there that shows the whole park. So this one over here, this big side, this shows all of the park. You're not going to be able to explore all of it during your visit, sad to say. Instead, you're just going to stick to one specific area. So let's walk you through how a visit will work. Like I said, you're going to get this park map on board. You're also probably going to get some park rangers and maybe some other staff that come on board. So that's a big difference with a visit to Glacier Bay compared to all of your other stops on an Alaska cruise, that nobody gets off the ship in Glacier Bay. Okay, nobody goes ashore, there's no pier, you don't get to go to the visitor center, you don't go on a hike. Instead, everybody stays on board, you enjoy it all together from right there on the ship. So nobody goes ashore. You actually bring more people on board. Like I said, some park rangers are going to come on board, join you for the day. So right after you enter the park boundary, typically early in the morning, it really depends on the ship's itinerary. Sometimes it could be later in the morning, like maybe a 10 o'clock arrival, but especially if you're doing like a 7-day Alaska round trip cruise, it's probably gonna be an early morning arrival. And I'm talking early. Sometimes we pick up those rangers around 5 o'clock, 5:30, usually before 6. They can't come on board, they're not allowed to come on board until the sun is up. But in Alaska in the summer, the sun is up a lot, so sometimes they do come on early. So right after you enter the park boundary, you're in this body of water called the Setacadae Narrows, and that's where the rangers come on board. Now I mentioned there's no pier where your cruise ship stops, so you don't swing in, you don't dock the ship for them to come on board. Instead, actually, your ship keeps heading into the park, keep just sailing along, and then the Park Service actually built a special boat, they call it the Sirach. That boat comes out and meets your ship, and then they open up a door and they throw down a rope ladder, and that park ranger boat comes alongside your ship. They match their speed, so the ranger boat is in contact with the bridge team. They decide which speed they want to go. They match their speeds, and then they press together. So wherever that opening is in your ship that they open up, a lot of times it's actually where the gangway is. When you go ashore, you'll notice there's like this hatch in the ship. They open up and put the gangway down. That's usually where the rangers come on board too. So the team on board opens that up, they throw a rope ladder down, the ranger boat matches the speed with your ship, presses up right next to it. I've heard this called a controlled collision. Captains don't usually like it when I call it that. They don't like to have collisions, but that is what I've most often heard it called, is a controlled collision. The boat presses right into the side of the ship, and the rangers and the team climb up that rope ladder into the ship to then spend the day in Glacier Bay with everybody on board. Now there's probably going to be some sort of central headquarters for the rangers and the park service team. This is going to vary from ship to ship, from cruise line to cruise line, so I can't really tell you where it is. It's probably in a venue with a great view of outside, because that's where the rangers like to be, but you're going to want to check the information from your cruise line to find out where this space is. And this is kind of going to be their mobile visitor center. Since you can't go ashore and visit the park headquarters, the park visitor center, they've brought some of it on board to you. So in addition to the park rangers, they typically also bring on a staff member from Alaska Geographic. That's the team that runs the gift shop in the park. If you've been to national parks before, you know there's often a gift shop where you can get hats, t-shirts, souvenirs, books, information on the park, all there in that gift shop. So they usually bring on a representative from the team that runs that park store, and they have a selection of items that are available. So that's going to be at that central location where this mobile visitor center is. That'll be on one side. And then the park rangers will also set up a table in that same area. And this is the visitor center part of it. They usually bring some exhibits on with them. Oftentimes they change those exhibits throughout the day, and a ranger will be there to answer questions as your day goes on. So you can look at the exhibits, you can ask a ranger a question when you visit there. So again, check your cruise specifically. If you get a daily program, information, the compass, whatever you may call it on your cruise line, just check that, see where that ranger area is going to be. A bit about that souvenir store from Alaska Geographic. I think for all cruise lines, it all goes on however you pay on board. That is your key card, your seat pass, your medallion, whatever it may be called. However you pay on board is how you're going to pay for souvenir items. So I don't think they take cash or credit card on any cruise line. Just like if you bought something in the shops on board, however you would charge that, that's how it's going to be charged for those souvenir items. Just keep in mind that the supplies they have are pretty limited. They don't have extra supplies. There's no like warehouse that you stop at partway on your journey into Glacier Bay. So it's pretty limited how much stuff they're going to have. So all that to say, if you see something in the morning that you like, that's the right size, that's the right color, if you think you want it, don't wait. Just buy it right away. Because if they run out, they run out. They can't get any more. Usually everything they have is out there and on display. So definitely buy it early. One of the top questions I get asked, especially by national park fans, is will the rangers bring a national park passport stamp? Yes, they do bring that cancellation stamp on board. Then people also ask, well, can I buy the passport book? Yes, you can, but there's a big qualifier on this. So they do sell it there as part of those gift store items, but I would say that's one of the first items that runs out. End of last season, we didn't even have them available on board at the end of the season. So not only did they sell out per voyage, they sold out for the whole season. So I do recommend, if you want the national park passport, if you don't have one already, get it ahead of time, order one. If you're going to a place like Skagway before you go to Glacier Bay, you can buy it at the park there and get your stamps for the Skagway parks, the Klondike Gold Rush parks, and then just stamp your passport also on board. So they do often have some available for sale, but it's a hot item. Everybody wants that passport, so you might want to think about getting that in advance and bringing it on your cruise. Okay, so the team comes on board in the Setacabay Narrows, and then you keep working your way up into the heart of Glacier Bay. So really, even though the team comes on board early in the morning, they're typically on board for like an hour and a half before there's really any type of event. The team's got to come on board, get everything set up before they can do anything. The first event that they usually have is going to be in wherever that mobile visitor center is. They're going to have some type of a welcome. Usually one of the rangers will speak. They'll introduce the team of rangers that are there with them. They'll introduce the people selling things. If they've brought on a cultural ambassador, like someone from Alaska Native Voices, they'll introduce that person as well, and just go over how the day is going to work. So if you're already well versed in what's going to happen that day, that might not be something that you really need to attend, but it's great to be there, meet the rangers, understand what's going to happen. If they have any updates on the schedule, they give it to you right then. And then You just keep sailing. Shortly after that welcome finishes, one of the rangers is going to start doing scenic commentary. This usually happens from the navigation bridge, so there's a microphone that the team can give the ranger, and then they will start talking about the history, the culture of Glacier Bay, pointing out any sites that you need to see, identifying glaciers that you pass. If there's wildlife that they spot, they're going to let you know that as well. Now that commentary, where it can be heard, is going to change on different ships. So again, you're going to want to check the information from your cruise line, but in general, the idea is that that commentary is heard anywhere that there's a good view of outside. So that means on the ship's outside decks. If they have a promenade deck that goes all the way around the ship, they have an outdoor pool deck, any outside deck, the bow of the ship, where there's speakers there, they want the commentary to be heard there. So there's a good chance you will hear it there. Also, if there are lounges with good outside views, there's like a crow's nest lounge with lots of windows, you can probably hear it there as well. And then on a lot of ships, they will also put it on the television. So you're just gonna have to check what the information is for your specific ship, where it's going to be heard. If it's on the stateroom TV, that's something you really need to know, especially if you have a balcony cabin, because then you have kind of your own private oasis. You could just turn on the TV, tune into the Rangers commentary, and then enjoy your balcony. Just keep your door open and you'll be able to hear that commentary as you go. What time that commentary will start, it's really going to depend on what the schedule is for your ship, but it's typically going to start right when you reach about the area that says Gloomy Knob here on your map. So about the Gloomy Knob area is where that commentary usually starts. Whether or not they have started talking by the time you get to Gloomy Knob, that's one of the first things that I want to point out. That's when you want to be outside. Now, in general, people will ask, which side of the ship is better? Throughout Glacier Bay, do I need to be on the port side? Do I need to be on the starboard side? You need to be on the outside, okay? That's where the best views are outside of the ship. In general, it doesn't matter which side you're on throughout the whole day. So if you have a balcony cabin, I wouldn't stress too much about which side you are on. Gloomy Knob is one of the few exceptions, because typically on the way into Glacier Bay, the navigation team gets a bit closer to Gloomy Knob than when they're on the way out. So Gloomy Knob is going to be on the starboard side of the ship, or the right-hand side of the ship, when you are facing forward. So if you have a room that's over on the port side, you might want to be on a different deck as you sail past Gloomy Knob. Now, why do you want to see Gloomy Knob? Well, Gloomy Knob is a great spot for wildlife spotting. This is kind of the only place in the park that you will see mountain goats. Yeah, there are mountain goats that are on the rock face. Sometimes we see them up on top. Just keep in mind that any wildlife in the park is going to be very, very small. So it's really important that you take binoculars with you. I know that binoculars are not a top item that people think of packing on a cruise, but they're really important for an Alaskan cruise, deceivingly so. Okay, you're going to look out there. I've done it many times. I've sailed it in Glacier Bay, I think probably 50 times at this point. You look out there and you'll think, if there was wildlife, I would definitely see it out there. It's right there. I can see the coastline. I would see any wildlife. But Alaska is so otherworldly, right? The mountains are so huge. This landscape is so immense that even though you think, like, I would definitely see a bear walking on the shoreline, really, when you see a bear, it's going to look like someone took a brown pencil and just put a little dot on the shoreline. So it's really deceiving how big this landscape is and then how small the wildlife is. So when there are mountain goats walking around on that cliff face, I've seen them a few times with the naked eye, but what it usually looks like is that there's a little golf ball moving on that cliff face. So it's really important to take binoculars. You're going to want to scope out Gloomy Knob, the rock face itself. Also, right before Gloomy Knob and right after Gloomy Knob, there are streams, there are rivers that come into the bay. I have seen bears in both places. Typically when the salmon are running, they're hanging out there hoping for a salmon snack. Also in the water, right off Gloomy Knob, I've seen orcas and I've seen humpbacks there. So super hot spot for wildlife. You're gonna wanna be outside. You're gonna wanna be on the starboard side of the ship as you pass Gloomy Knob. After you pass Gloomy Knob, you will keep making your way up the bay. You will see some glaciers in the distance. So again, the commentary has started by now. The rangers are going to be pointing things out. If you haven't made it up to the table where they're selling things or they have exhibits, now is a good time to do it after you get past Gloomy Knob. And then you're gonna go all the way to the top, up here at the bay. And you've got two different options. You'll see that the bay branches out here, that it Y's off. The two options that you have are you're either going to go into Tar Inlet and see Margerie Glacier, or you're going to go into Johns Hopkins Inlet and see Johns Hopkins Glacier. For most of the season, ships are going to go to Margerie Glacier. Okay, so there when you get to the Y, you're going to kind of stay straight ahead, take the right-hand fork a little bit, and head in there to see Margerie Glacier. The other option, like I said, would be to go to Johns Hopkins Glacier. Now, the reason most go to Margerie and not Johns Hopkins is that Johns Hopkins Inlet is actually a birthing ground for seals. So for much of the summer season, the seals are in there having their babies, and so cruise ships are not allowed to enter. So I think I believe it's after September 1st that ships are kind of permitted to go in, but it really just depends on the seals. If the seals are still there and hanging out, even if it's after September 1st, the Park Service is going to ask them like, hey, please don't go in there yet. The seals were late this year, so you can't go in. So it really just depends on what the conditions are, what the seals are up to, whether or not you can go in there. If you can't go into Johns Hopkins Inlet, sometimes you will come as far as what's called Jaw Point. It's just this little rock outcropping, and sometimes the ship can go that far and then turn the ship around, and if you're in the right spot, you can look down Johns Hopkins Inlet and see the glacier in the distance. That's not always possible. First of all, it's not always possible just because of timing. If your ship has a short visit in the bay, you might not have time to head in there and make that swing and do that. And then also just because of the seals. If the seals are hanging out there by Jaw Point, for their safety, your ship's not going to be able to go in there and do that. So if you get to see Johns Hopkins Glacier, either get to sail in there, or if you just get to go to Jaw Point, make the swing and see it down the inlet, it's really incredible because not a lot of people get to do that. Most people go to Margerie. That's not to say anything bad about Margerie. Both are spectacular glaciers. So when you get all the way up there to Margerie Glacier, first of all, it starts up in the mountains about 21 miles away from where your ship is sitting. Okay, it starts way up in the mountains, and then it's this river of ice that winds its way down the mountains, grinding against all of the rock that it's pushing against as it reaches the water. So it's a tidewater glacier because it does reach the water. When you're on your ship, looking at the face of Margerie Glacier, this beautiful white wall of ice that you see, it's about a mile wide. Again, because the scale of Alaska is so epic, it's not going to look like it's a mile wide, but it's about a mile wide. And then that face that you're looking at, it's about 350 feet high, and then there's another 100 feet of ice that's below the waterline. Again, it's not going to look like that. So that's why I'm telling you, so that you are able to keep that in mind, just the scale of how massive this glacier is. A mile wide and 350 feet of ice towering out of the water. Now, of course, what people want to see when they visit Glacier Bay or any other glacier is they want to see that big chunk of ice fall off and fall into the water. That's called calving, when part of a glacier breaks apart and falls into the sea. Calving is never guaranteed. I have been to a glacier and have seen just calvings, one right after another. I've been there and I've just seen a few little bits fall off. I've been there and I've seen massive chunks come down, and I've been there and I've seen nothing happen at all. So it really just depends. It depends on what the weather was days before your visit. A lot of the calving is actually due to the fact that this is a flowing river of ice, that there's more ice being formed up high in the mountains that's pushing the rest of this ice down the mountain. Obviously, when it then reaches the end, it gets unstable, right? I tell people, think of like a pile of loose Legos sitting on a table. And as you push it, there's nothing to keep it in place, so it scatters everywhere. As a glacier flows down, it typically flows down a valley, or it's carved a valley over years. And so it's got something that constrains it. It's got rock on either side, and then it's got more ice behind it pushing. But once it reaches the water, there's nothing there to keep it all intact anymore, so then things start to fall apart. Plus, ice and salt water, not the best of friends, so that's also going to lead to this erosion that then makes it calve. So calving's never guaranteed, but if you are going to see it, you are going to see it at either Margerie Glacier or at Johns Hopkins if you are visiting Johns Hopkins Glacier. So this is the time when your ship is there at the face of the glacier. This is when you want to spend as much time as possible outside. Now, where should you be outside? Well, you have a few different options. Like I said, you might be able to just be on your balcony if you have a balcony. But what's good to know is that, we noticed here on the map, this is a dead end, right? We're headed in to the glacier. Well, there's nowhere to go except back out the same way that you came, so your ship's gonna have to turn around. So what typically happens, again, it's gonna depend on the cruise line, it's gonna depend on the captain, it's gonna depend on the schedule for your ship, but the team on board knows that this is what everybody came to Alaska for, right? They want to see glaciers. So what will typically happen is that you're gonna go as far in as you can. Either going to see Margerie Glacier, or if you're going Johns Hopkins Inlet to see Johns Hopkins Glacier, you'll go in as close as the captain deems is safe. It's based on the weather, based on how much ice is in the water. You'll get as close as he or she thinks that you can. And then they'll typically let the ship just sit there with one side facing the glacier. So, for example, for Margerie Glacier, just based on where that glacier is, the port side of the ship is going to get to see it first. You sail in with a bow to the end of the inlet. The port side is facing Margerie Glacier. The captain will typically let the ship stay there for a while, sometimes, up to 30 minutes with one side facing the ship, and then they slowly rotate the ship around, so now the starboard side is facing Margerie Glacier. But unless you're in a time crunch, they don't just take off, because they know that people have rooms on the starboard side as well. So they will typically hang out there, maybe even wait another 30 minutes, so people on the starboard side get to see it, and then start slowly sailing out of Tar Inlet and back down the bay. So really, it shouldn't matter where your stateroom is. If you have an outside cabin, you should be able to get a good view of the glacier. It just might not be the first view. Again, the port side will see it first, and then the starboard side will see it. Plus, you can go around the ship. You can go, to the back if there's an aft pool, out to the bow, and get views of it from there as well. Speaking of the bow, something that I wanted to mention, if you are going to Margerie Glacier, if you are sailing in Tar Inlet, when you get all the way into Tar Inlet, the bow of the ship is actually going to be facing another glacier, and this is called Grand Pacific Glacier. Very few people on board believe me when I tell them that they are looking at a glacier, because right now Grand Pacific is covered in rocks and dirt and sediment, but underneath that there is a glacier there. And Grand Pacific now goes unnoticed, but I would actually say it is the most important glacier in Glacier Bay, because it's believed that Grand Pacific carved this entire bay. Everything that is water on this map was at one time a glacier, and scientists think that Grand Pacific was that glacier that filled this whole bay. As it retreated, it left this incredible wilderness that we're lucky enough to get to sail through and get to see. So I want you to make it a point. If you are going to visit Margerie Glacier, do not miss Grand Pacific Glacier. Look for it. Again, it's just going to look kind of like a hill of dirt at the top of that inlet, but that is what we owe our thanks to for carving this incredible Glacier Bay, so make sure you look for that. So if you are standing looking at Margerie Glacier, Grand Pacific is going to be off to your right. Okay, look at Margerie Glacier, Grand Pacific is to the right. So that is Tar Inlet, that is Margerie Glacier. Like I said, you might be lucky enough to either go to Jaw Point or to go into Johns Hopkins Inlet, depending on what time of the year it is, what the seals are up to. Also right there by Jaw Point, there's another glacier called Lamplugh Glacier. It's also called Lamplugh the Blue, because this is a glacier that tends to look bluer than other glaciers. Now you may notice sometimes that when you see a glacier in real life or in a picture, maybe it's white, maybe it looks blue. A lot of that has to do with the weather, the conditions, the day that you are there. Okay, it's all about the structure of glacial ice. Glacial ice is denser than like an icicle that hangs off your garage or ice in your drink. And it absorbs all light except for blue light. So it actually bounces blue light back to your eye, and so that's why it can appear blue. On a sunny day, glaciers tend to look whiter. On an overcast or even rainy day, glaciers tend to look blue. So that's why I say there is no such thing as bad weather for Glacier Bay, only improper clothing, because it doesn't matter what the conditions are, it's still going to be beautiful. If you get a sunny day, you get that white sparkling glacier, which is great to see. But if you get a rainy, cloudy day, then you get that really interesting blue color of the glaciers that's really unique to glaciers. So a great opportunity to see that as well. So no such thing as a bad day. You just want to make sure that you gear up for it. You're going to want a waterproof jacket, waterproof shoes. At the minimum, those are the two things you need. I also recommend waterproof pants. If you've got rain pants or some type of wicking hiking pants, that's just going to make your visit a lot more comfortable. That way, no matter what the conditions are, you'll be ready for it. You're still going to be able to enjoy your day up there in the bay. So once you visit whatever your main attraction is, be that Margerie Glacier, be that Johns Hopkins Glacier, you'll probably swing by Lamplugh Glacier, and then you're going to start making your way back out of Glacier Bay. Typically, it's at this time, as you're headed back out of the bay, that the ranger team moves the activities inside the ship. So there's been one ranger all day providing commentary, pointing out things you need to see. Then there's at least one other ranger on board with them, most likely. That ranger will then give a talk somewhere on board in one of the theaters of the ship. The topic is kind of up to the ranger. I've heard talks about maps and cartography. I've heard talks about whales. I've heard talks about very small sea life that lives in the bay. So it just really depends on what that ranger's interest is. So they're going to give a ranger talk. Again, if you've visited national parks before, you know that they often have these ranger talks either in the campground or at the visitor center. So you get that experience on board as well. Then, again, if you have time, you may also swing by what's called South Marble Island. So it is pretty far south. After you go past Gloomy Knob again, swing by South Marble Island. That is a great place to look for sea lions. If it's quiet out on deck, you might even be able to hear the sea lions. Again, you're really going to need the binoculars to see them out there as well. You'll keep going further south. When you then reach Strawberry Island, that's typically when the rangers will take off. So if you didn't want to get up early in the morning to see the rangers come on board, but you do want to see that where their boat comes alongside, matches your speed, and then they get back on the boat, you'll have another chance to see it in the afternoon. So again, you'll need to check the official information from your cruise line about when they expect that to happen. Also, sometimes the rangers will make an announcement, both with the time and with the side of the ship where it's going to be happening. So just keep that in mind. Listen for that announcement if you did want to see those rangers leave you. And then you take off through Sadaka Narrows out into the icy, straight body of water to then continue your Alaska cruise. A few more points to make about Glacier Bay. We talked about calving. We talked about all of the wildlife available to see around Gloomy Knob. I get asked a lot about whales. If you are hoping to see whales, your best bet is down at the mouth of the bay. Whales tend to really like areas where a large body of water meets a narrower body of water. There tends to be a lot of food there. So right there where Icy Strait meets Setaukeday Narrows, that can be a great spot to see whales. So that means early in the morning when the rangers come on board. If you want to see the rangers come on board, you can be watching for whales at the same time. But then you also have that opportunity once the rangers leave. And as you're sailing through Icy Strait, lots of whales have been sighted through that area as well. We don't typically see a lot of whales way up in the bay, like at the face of the glacier. That being said, I have seen whales in Tar Inlet when I was headed over to Johns Hopkins Inlet, so it is possible. Just your best bet for them is going to be down at the entrance, which is also the exit of the bay. So early in the morning typically, and then later in the afternoon, based on when those rangers come on board. That would be a good time to see them. Other wildlife you can look for. I have seen bald eagles. I've seen bald eagles sitting on chunks of ice that have calved off of a glacier. Otters. You are not going to get out of seeing an otter in your visit to Glacier Bay. If you wanted to see sea otters on your Alaskan cruise, Glacier Bay is a great place to do it. You will see lots of otters. You may also see seals. Sometimes people have a hard time figuring out which one they're seeing, especially if they don't have binoculars. A seal will typically be one dot in the water, while an otter will be two dots pretty close together. Because otters actually float on their backs. They have their head out of the water, but then they also have their feet sticking out as well. So if you see two dots relatively close together, pretty safe bet that that's an otter. I've seen those, all the way up. I've seen them, I think even at Margerie Glacier, I've seen seals and I've seen otters up there. But then I've seen them all the way down, even in the icy straits. I've seen a bunch just as we sail along, just constantly. There's one, there's one, there's one, there's one. So lots to see. Seals, typically at the face of the glacier, that's where I look for them. They like to be hauled out on icebergs, floating in the water. They're safe up there from predators, so you tend to see them up there. Like I said, if you're going into Johns Hopkins, that is where the seals are born. So even late in the season, when ships are allowed to come in, make sure you got your binoculars with you. Scope out all the ice at the base of the glacier. I've seen hundreds of seals in there before, along with lots of seal pups, since that's where they were just born. So there are chances to see other wildlife, especially birds. If you're a birder, Glacier Bay is a great place to come. Lots of bird species to check out. But I think those are most of your wildlife highlights for you. Let me know down below if you have any questions. Glacier Bay is definitely the day that I look forward to the most on any Alaskan cruise. And it's my busiest day of the cruise, but it just never gets old. It is such a beautiful, otherworldly place. The mountains, the glaciers, the wildlife. Oh, bears. We didn't talk about bears. Sorry. Also mentioned bears a little bit at Gloomy Knob, but didn't mention them throughout the rest of the park. You're just going to want to be scanning the shoreline. There may be bears out there anywhere. I've seen them by Job Point before. I've seen them along most of the coast. We even saw them on Russell Island one time. And last year I was actually lucky enough to see a pack of wolves. That is very unusual, but it did happen. People also sometimes ask about moose. Very unusual. I think it has happened once that I've been on board that we spotted a moose from the ship. So it certainly can happen. They are there, they are around. This is a little far south for moose, especially down on the coastline. They are in the park, but typically not in the area where the ships are sailing, but it is possible. So a chance to see wolves, a chance to see moose. If you do see any though, know that you are very, very lucky. Even bears, I have been there, like I said, 50 times. I would say less than 10% of those times have I spotted a bear in Glacier Bay. So it is possible, but just set your expectations that it's not likely, but it is possible that you will see one. But I hope you can tell from my excitement how much I love a visit to Glacier Bay. I am so excited for you to go there and see it because it is such an incredible place. It's a place I think everyone should see at least once in their lifetime. So I hope you have an incredible Alaska cruise. I hope you enjoy Glacier Bay. Let me know if you have any questions. Make sure you check out my other Alaska port videos. Subscribe to the channel. I'm putting out new content all the time. And then I've got that book, See More Alaska, available for you on Amazon. You can check that out if you want more tips for making the most out of your Alaskan cruise. Enjoy Glacier Bay.